Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Game of Bros, yet another Game of Thrones podcast. I am one of your two hosts, Chris Dashu. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and yours, all the way from the incest capital of the world,
London, in the UK.
Yeah,
Speaking of incestual bloodlines,
right? The Queen Elizabeth just died.
Yeah,
and also in Game of
she was not, but historically,
no, she was not, but she was not
like. But hundreds of years ago.
But she was. But she was. But she was because all of the royal people are inbred. She married her cousin. But we're not here to talk about politics, but we are here to talk about politics, just not the real kind. We're here to talk about the fake kind. We're here to talk about HBO's latest iteration of Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and we're talking about the fourth episode, King of the Narrow Sea. So the episode aired September 11th, 2022, and this time, ladies and gentlemen, we've got everybody's favorite Game of Thrones subgenre, a little bit of incest, whole lot of incest. Half the episode's all about incest. And what happens?
A little bit or a lot of it when it comes to Game of Thrones?
It's, you know what? There's more incest. There's more incest in this show only because we actually get to see like the immediate fallout of it, which is really weird.
I mean, we see Brandon,
I know, but then they spend the rest of that first season, the characters trying to unpack what's going on. In this, it's like, it would be like if Ned Stark knew immediately the moment Bran got pushed out the window, oh, it's incest between Cersei and Jaime. In this, it's like, oh no, like it makes sense that they're banging because they're Targaryens, like, oopsie.
I guess the difference is in this context, besides the Jon and so I'm saying, like, I guess in this context, like, incest is still much like we were talking about, like, in real life, like, up to a certain point was socially accepted in royal line.
Within, like, again, it's not like brother and sister, but that was Jaime and Cersei, but that's like, that's like the
brother and sister.
Right. That's like the most, I guess, kind of like egregious version of incest we've seen in this show before, but like this is pretty, it's an uncle and his niece. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
It's 2 episodes ago we had 50-year-old man and his 12-year-old cousin.
Right.
Last episode was proposed half sister and half brother. One's 17, one's 2. And then this episode, they sort of went all the way. We can talk about what all the way means with uncle and niece, which actually, when I compare it to what I just said, it's not that bad.
No.
So
not only is it not that bad, but also the way that it's filmed is filmed in a way that I was so surprised because it's so not Game of Thrones, almost because it's being filmed by a woman.
I was going to say it was,
which it is like, Claire Kilner. I mean, look, Claire Kilner does a better job filming this one sex scene in this episode than anyone did in the first iteration of this show. It's what I wanted from this show, to not take the sex seriously, but when it's something like this, give it a little bit of weight, which they did.
And did you watch the after the episode piece?
Oh, of course.
She was saying that, yes, it was like consensual in the sense of Rhaenyra wanted it, but she was definitely being manipulated and essentially used as a means to an end for Daemon. Like, it wasn't
right.
Like, Rhaenyra is actually attracted to Daemon for, we can talk about she needs a therapist, but Daemon, he cares about her like as a person, but he doesn't really care about her as a romantic object.
Right. So this entire episode concerns Daemon returning now to King's Landing after he is turned into the King of the Narrow Sea, because that's what happens after he killed the crab feeder, Mr. Krabs, as you like to keep putting him. But he's now firmly in the rearview mirror because, well, we're moving forward. This show is always moving forward, baby.
And it's interesting when like that first scene happens when Daemon comes in. He's like basically, well, actually, let's rewind. So before that, Rhaenyra's going on her sort of tour of meeting men,
right? Because they're taking her in. She's taking it in stride. What she said at the end of the last episode, which is, "I'm going to find a partner for myself so that I can maybe be happy." And
she has to approve it, but all the guys are kind of not great options. One being like a 55-year-old man, the other one being like basically another child. Gets in kind of a funny but also sad murderous spree for
disturbing, fighting over her. How old is she supposed to be in the context of the show? 17? Okay.
17, 18.
Okay.
Give or take. And so this episode has another time skip of like, because her new brother has been born and, he's probably a few months old, we can establish probably between like 3 to 6 months between the last episode that we saw when
like I said, it just keeps downhilling. Yeah. The show is not, it's really not even it's stopping in as much as these episodes are looking around in the world and giving you kind of a what's going on in the events. But so far, this show has just been like downhill. Yeah. Every episode, there's a time jump. And you know what, man? It's like, in a way, it's kind of hard for me to stay grounded in this show because it feels like Whiplash. They're just like pulling us along. And at some point we know it's going to be like, and now the characters are older, like, older. And I think the next episode's the last one, right?
Yeah. I do wonder if after that point, will they kind of slow down the time? I mean, I guess we'll find out, but my guess is yes, but I could also be wrong.
Well, they
have a lot of ground to cover. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they don't have to, maybe because I think the book it's based on does have some significant time jumps because there's like different stories. So,
right. Well, and again, the book that it's based off of is not as much the way Game of Thrones was based off of a book. This is like the Lord of the Rings show. They know the events, but they're building those events out more than the books do.
They have a loose structure.
Yeah. Which is why the crab feeder dying after one episode, he has like one sentence in the book essentially. So it shouldn't have been surprising. Again, I'm not reading anything. I'm not trying to read ahead or give myself a reason to know that they were going to I didn't realize Rhaenyra and Daemon were going to bang. I didn't even see that coming.
So, a couple things. One is you texted me because I live in England for anyone that doesn't know, which is why our things usually come out like late Monday or Tuesday rather than Sunday, because I just can't stay up till 5 a.m.
Watching Game of Thrones, you mean? Why not?
So you texted me saying the episode was fucked up. And so I was kind of like, what does that mean? And then there was an episode. So Damon comes back and it almost seems like he's sort of matured a bit. He's got a haircut.
Right. Maybe not even a wig anymore. It might just be Matt Smith's dyed hair. I don't know. It looks pretty good finally, all of a sudden.
To my point about the Valerians, so you can give them short hair and make it look better, but I digress. So he comes back and he's like, I'm here in your honor. I want to be back in your good graces. I mean, you don't fully buy it. And Miguel Sapochnik says this at the end of the episode, like Damon doesn't actually ever change. He just kind of like pretends like he does. He is who he is, which is not a good person, but highly entertaining. And then he like says one thing to Rhaenyra about how she's matured. And she says he's matured. And then I was like, fuck, they're going to fuck. Like,
yeah, dude. I didn't think it was going there. Like it goes there in, you know what? Here's the thing. I'm not going to say I forgot what Game of Thrones is, but there was part of me that kind of forgot what Game of Thrones is in a way.
Because Game of Thrones has two things, right? You got dragons and you got fucking usually around incest.
And political intrigue.
You didn't have a lot of dragons this episode, which means you're getting fucking.
But here's the thing. We haven't gotten any fucking up until this point. This is the first time this show we've really gotten something that feels akin to the first run of the show. I would even say the first season of the show. Really, I mean, if you go back and watch it, there's a lot of tits and ass, and there hasn't been there hasn't been a lot of that in the show so far. But this is where it's like, here it is. But here's the thing. It's shot in a way that doesn't feel like, again, it felt very workmanlike in the original show. Here they're like, Claire Kilner is giving it something interesting. She's stylizing it in a way that's nicer to look at than just tits and ass. I'm not saying tits and ass are nice to look at, but like at this point I've seen it show like do something else. And Claire Kilner really does. And so like the episode kind of is about, so now Damon's back. He's sort of reconnected. He and Rhaenyra have connected and he basically takes Rhaenyra out of the castle. We actually see King's Landing properly for the first time. We get a little bit of a vibe. It's the first time we've seen like people that aren't royal adjacent doing more than just walking around in the background.
Yeah. And so she's in, and it seems like besides the first episode where he just murders a bunch of people, it seems like kind of a interesting place to be. They party a lot. We get a little bit of a vibe. Like the people seem to generally be okay with the king, but they're very much anti a woman coming. I mean, they're really beating your head over like this. People like women, they just won't accept a woman coming to the throne, which sort of feeds into Otto's whole point that he thinks a boy is necessary. So Aegon is necessary to come to the throne to avoid a conflict.
Right.
And that will come to a head later in the episode. But Rhaenyra actually sees the people. And she's like, I don't care what they think.
Very much like season 6 of Game of Thrones, where is it Maisie Williams is running around seeing the
Faceless
she was
Man or
tasked to
whatever.
go kill the actor at the that's what it reminded me of. It's a bit of story. It's a story within a story, right? They're essentially commenting on what we've seen, but it's an in-world commentary on it. I think it works rather well. It's like you said. I think as much as I do like this show and the message that it's going for, maybe tone it down a little bit.
We get it. Like we get it. We get it.
Even the most oblivious of fans, I feel like at this point, after the second episode where you have the queen who wasn't talking to Rhaenyra and giving her that whole spiel, and then the last episode, they kind of did the whole thing again where they're like, a woman can't be, in power. I mean, Viserys and Rhaenyra have that conversation again, and then he has that conversation again in this episode. It's like, we get it. Like, have them talk about something else. Like, it's like obvious at this point.
The only thing that I could see it being there for is like, okay, maybe Otto isn't like a complete like troglodyte. Like, they do sort of represent the public sentiment. Like, it's not just a royal sort of uppity thing. It's the actual people also support this line of thought, which is fine. But I also,
he's right. Like, whether or not you like it, he is right.
The people at this point are not accepting him. So there may be something to his machinations in the background with Aegon.
Well, and here's the other thing that, again, we're kind of dancing around here. At the whole episode is really about, once again, Viserys trying to deal with the problems that Rhaenyra is making through fault of her own or no fault of her own, her being used as a political pawn and allowing herself to be used as a political pawn. But the other issue in this episode is like what you've been talking about with Rhys Ifans, Otto Hightower trying to essentially make the case for doing the right thing, even though the right thing is the harder of the 3 things to do. And I think it's funny that this show is, again, taking this to task because it's really painting Viserys as just the most limp dick of limp dick kings ever put forth in this series. He is so unable to make decisions on his own. It's hilarious.
I agree with you, except I actually think the second half of this episode is the first time he really gets like proper kingly to me. And he even starts wearing like a badass outfit.
Right, but even then he makes the mistake again. He doubles down on his bad decisions.
I'm actually not sure if I think he's making a mistake per se, because I think he's right that Otto is a bit self-interested and not being completely honest with him. But Otto also, I think, is doing what he probably thinks he is best. But even Mikhail,
did Otto think his daughter would really become queen and have 2 children by the king? That's the question that I have.
I don't think he thought that per se, but he's just kind of like nudging it and kind of like,
right. We saw he kind of pimped her out in that episode.
Yeah. Let's see what happens. And the king's right. Like, he does have a bit of blinders about Aegon, which may or may not be the right thing to do. But as long as like he's got that relation to it, he'll never be able to give the king like completely objective advice. And I mean, I don't think I think Viserys was wrong about saying like he probably had something to do with his father's death. I mean, he's like hinting at it. I doubt that was the case. Otto doesn't really strike me as that kind of guy. Like, he does strike me as quite loyal to Viserys. But it's enough when he thinks about it to start planting seeds of doubt. And I appreciate that. I was like, okay, finally, at least, Viserys may or may not be making the completely right decision, but he's like, at least his eyes are open a bit. And I think he's not as naive as we initially thought when it comes to Otto and Aegon and kind of the advice he's getting, which I appreciated, because I was like, finally, we see something. He calls out his brother because Otto basically gets fed information from similar to like Varys's army of spies. So it is implying that Otto is spying on Rhaenyra, which is not a great look.
But what is he expected to do? Well, I don't know. Like, I maybe this is the wrong read here, but I agree with Otto Hightower 100%. Because again, here's why. If you put Aegon on the throne, it fixes everything.
It does fix everything.
It fixes everything.
Except Viserys then breaks his bond to Rhaenyra, which is something that we're learning is important to him. It is.
Right, but at what point does she push him for it to not be important to him?
Yeah, not like it because he did say,
Banging
like,
your uncle should have been it for me if I was him.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So they go out to the town. Then Damon takes her to a brothel where they see a
Sir, pleasure house.
And so technically they don't fuck, and because he can't get it up, like, and it's a bit unclear in the episode, like why he kind of stops the initiation, because she's really into it. And actually watching the part after the episode, they're saying like the fact that she was so into it, Damon didn't like it. He was basically couldn't get it up because he was hoping like surprise her, like have power over her. And the fact that she was so receptive to it, like mentally fucked with him, which shows how fucked up Damon is. Like it really had nothing to do about like attraction. It's just purely a power
which
play.
which is obvious.
Yeah. And so when I guess later Alicent is asking her, and I wrote this quote down, when she says, well, you Targaryens do have queer customs, amazing quote. When asking about if she had sex with Damon, she says no and swears upon her mother's life. And I guess technically that's true because Damon just like never enters her. But I mean, they would have if whatever.
He could. They would have if he could have.
Yeah, and Damon kind of basically says they did when he's questioned by the king, which I guess more or less we're being a bit semantic.
Well, I mean, he even says it. I mean, Viserys is right. And like you said, he does kind of get his own. He gets a little bit of his own ability to make a decision here. He goes. What does he say? He's like, it doesn't matter if they fucked or not. It's the perception. Perception and reality is all that. I mean, even in our own reality right now, perception is more important than reality. Perception is reality, and at this point anymore.
And so when Rhaenyra comes back after the sort of like not sex with Damon, that she just basically is like, I'm horny. I'm like, I now know like the sex thing is
cool.
Blue
balls.
Like, yeah, she's like, Kristen, you're the closest guy to me, and I've showed marginal attraction to you in the past. And you can see Kristen being like, should I do this or should I not? Like he's really debating.
Serve your queen, serve your princess, my lord.
I could not help but think, man, how long, there was no quickies back in the day with all the armor, right? Because like, how fucking long does it take to undress?
That scene was hilarious. That scene was hilarious. It was one of the funniest scenes that this show has ever done. Because I have to believe it was intentional to draw it out so long with all these like hilarious shots of like unbuckling the armor and setting it down.
Like just one armband took like 2 minutes, and then she had the fucking neck armor, which I didn't even know existed, in the helmet, and then they both had the boots, and I was like, oh yeah, man, like you're committed to, and if someone walks in on you, you're like, you're done.
Yeah, you know? We're banging. Sorry, come back later.
So she bangs Sir Kristen because Damon couldn't do it. And then Otto reports that to the king. The king basically is telling Otto, like, no, you're a liar. Like, your designs are obvious to Otto, which caught me by surprise because he's kind of been seemingly oblivious. But I'm thinking like he's not oblivious so much as he is like he's okay with people acting self-interested, as he says. Everyone is self-interested if it generally aligns with what he thinks is important.
Right. To a point, he's allowing people to be self-interested.
To a point, because it shows that he's not as naive as we've seen. But when he brings Damon to get questioned, and Rhaenyra is questioned by Alicent because Alicent overhears, and he basically like he's wearing this black outfit, like it's pretty cool. Like he seems very powerful, and he takes a knife to Damon. He's basically like, get the fuck out of here. Like I'm properly banishing you. I'm not standing up for you anymore. Like and apparently women needed to be virgins, kind of similar to like the medieval times or whatever. So like. It's less about, I mean, the incest I think is relevant, but I think it's more about like just taking her virginity.
Sullying her, as they would say, defiling her.
And so she has been technically defiled by Kristen, but they don't know this.
Right. And, but I think they might, well, I guess if she has to be a virgin, that's a problem. But of the issues that they have with it, it's probably the least issue to have sex with her protector, less her uncle. Yeah.
Well, Kristen has taken the vow of chastity, but
So had Podrick, baby.
And so Damon then kind of does a Hail Mary, like, well, let me marry her. And then the king, like, it's like, get the fuck out of here. Even though, like, it logistically makes sense. But he's like, you have a wife who I think we'll see in the second half of the season because they've hinted at her a lot, but we haven't seen her. And then we get another weird scene with his lover. Oh
my God, this again.
Mysaria. That whole scene was bizarre. I'm like, why is he in this random... Because he, after the not sex scene with Rhaenyra, instead of going back to the castle, Damon is like in this random place, and Mysaria is there, and I don't know if she is a bad actress, but she is acting bad on this show. Like her line reads are so bad. I don't care about her at all.
Yeah,
I don't really know.
She's not great. She has a bigger part to play later down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only reason I was like, this scene made no sense. And so then it kind of deals with the truth coming out. Daemon tells Viserys they did, and then Viserys asks Rhaenyra, and she's kind of the whole like perception, that whole perception point. She says no, they didn't, which, like as we said, technically is true, but it's like in the spirit of
doesn't matter if it's true. The truth is not what matters anymore. Anyways, if someone saw them in there doing that, doesn't matter what happened. Doesn't matter who couldn't get what up. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I appreciate that about this show, that this show is willing to say that. I mean, again, in this day and age, I don't know how you couldn't say that, given that that's part of like our daily life anymore, is perception and reality being so miserably like blurred constantly.
Because I mean, it's going to be on the cue boards in King's Landing that that this happened. So
right. I mean, again, the people of King's Landing knowing this information doesn't really do anything. Like what can they do about it? Make jokes,
make it harder for him to marry her off, and then also potentially, if she does ascend to the throne, cause more problems. And so the compromise is you're going to have to just get married to the Valerian house, because that point comes back up. Corlys is still pissed about the king not marrying his 12-year-old daughter like a bunch of years ago. And so
but he's about to get his wish.
Yeah. So that's like, okay, Rhaenyra fucked up. And the king's like, you know what? I tried to let you do your thing. You're getting married to Laenor. And
the third dragon rider that we've seen in the show,
who is also her cousin. So the incest is still in play. Each episode's getting like a little bit less close. So, the little cousin incest is.
What level of incest is okay? Because here's the thing.
This level is okay in the show.
I guess so.
Sure, okay.
But like at some point, Rhaenyra is going to get with somebody again that is very problematic for the show, as the show has said. But at that point, I guess it's not problematic, or it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It's like
because I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well,
like, we don't want to spoil.
Want to spoil it, but again, it's this question that I have of like they've shown now that incest is a problem in the universe, but the incest isn't a problem in the universe in some ways.
It's not that it was incest per se. It's that it was Daemon who is already kind of on the king's shit list, and he's not a serious suitor. So it's not like he was married. Right. B, it's because he wanted to marry her in something that causes an alliance. And Daemon is not that person. And the whole her not being a virgin thing. So I think it's less about her fucking her uncle than it is just about them fucking.
That makes sense.
Because her half brother was proposed last week, and the king was like, "This is ridiculous," but he wasn't like, "This is an impossibility." Otto was proposed, so it's technically okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess my question here is Viserys continuing to put himself in a no-win situation? I think he is, right? He's trying to do the right thing seemingly, but I think everybody just keeps giving him a bigger shovel to dig a hole with.
Part of me is is it too little too late? Because it's maybe he should have gotten rid of Otto before all of the Alicent stuff, but now,
that's too late now.
Yeah. And who is going to be his proper hand? Like I said, I appreciate him being a bit more assertive, and I'm like, okay, this is what he needs if he wants to continue. But it does seem like you're right. There is going to be some sort of problems. And then there was also, speaking of weird sex scenes, the scene where he has sex with Alicent, where he just summons her at 3 a.m. and he's got all the sores on his back. It was that whole scene was weird, right?
Yeah.
I was it just trying to show that maybe there's not a lot of love in their relationship, although it seems like I don't know. And I guess we see the more sores on his back to see it keeps happening. I don't know if it's saying it's fatal or just emphasizing the point we made last week that he may not be proper to be on the throne because he keeps getting injured by it.
I mean, that's the in-universe lore explanation. I don't think he's a very good king. I mean, again, he's a king in peacetime, but the question that, always is asked of kings in peacetime is are you doing enough to ensure the peace, or are you just living in the peace now and handing it off to somebody else? Because when he's not king anymore, obviously we know what the conflict point is when he dies.
Yeah. It's going to be probably something between Aegon, which I assume he'll be older after the time jump. We don't really know about anything about his personality.
It'll be his sons, Rhaenyra, Daemon,
maybe Daemon,
the Valerians. Like, it's going to be all of them. Because it's the Dance of the Dragons. That's what this is leading to, is the moment of Targaryens fighting one another because the crown. Because there are ostensibly now there are 4 people with claims. Mm-hmm. There's the 2 children, Aegon and Aemon, who are
the Aegon because he's the oldest,
right? But his son would technically be the next one after him. So it would go those 2
by the old laws,
right? By the quote old laws, and then you have Rhaenyra, who has been said to be the next in line per her father. Then there's Daemon, who I guess
at one point in time he was, and maybe if like all of the king's family died, it would go back to Daemon,
right? Which means he would have to kill all of them to be king. And then there's the Valerians, who have a claim before Viserys, technically, because of the queen who wasn't getting passed over for Viserys.
Once Laenor marries Rhaenyra, Laenor would become the king in waiting,
right?
Because she would become the queen, and then their child would. So that kind of fills that gap for the Valyrians
if they want it. If that ends up happening.
I mean, Corlys wants that for sure. That's why he wanted Viserys to marry his.
But I think he wanted.
daughter.
I think he wanted closer connection to it, right?
But it's true that like it's going to really firm up Rhaenyra's claim, because now Corlys is going to have a vested interest in like her maintaining the direct line to the throne, because that would directly implicate like
his side of the family.
So
because all they have right now is the fact that Corlys is married to the queen who wasn't Targaryen, and that's their son and daughter are Targaryens, but to be married to essentially a closer, I guess it would just be essentially just about
the next
same
person in line. It'd be married to someone that's in line for the throne.
Less that he's a target, less that she's a Targaryen, and more she's the heir to the throne.
Yeah. Corlys wants power. I mean, as do most people, but that's clear. That's what like Corlys is not a he's quite transparent.
Right. Yeah. And we don't even see him in this episode. So
No. They said they haven't seen him in basically since even though the problem's been resolved, he's still mad about the beef with the king, and he seems quite petty, but I'm sure it's going to come back around, and the Laenor proposal will probably be well appreciated by his side.
Right. And that's if you watch the preview for next week, it's pretty obvious where we're going next week, which seems like something along the lines of like the Red Wedding. I'm not sure.
I got Red Wedding vibes from the trailer, although maybe it looked like there's some sort of fight. Maybe it's not like murder or just more like fisticuffs, but it does seem like it's going to be a wedding episode, and it's not going to be in the tradition of Game of Thrones weddings.
Right. I was saying, in the tradition of WWE weddings and apparently Game of Thrones weddings, nobody actually gets married in these things. But that's exciting because, I mean, it means we're getting ever closer to the time jump, because I think you're right. I think, 2 or 3 years from now, or 2 or 3 seasons down the road of this show, because this is not the only season of the show. And I think at this point, it could be safely said this show's getting at least one more season. Yeah. Right. Fair. I think it's fair to say that so far. I'm excited for when the show does get to the point where we're not jumping around anymore, because I think the show will really hit its stride, because I think it hasn't hit it yet. As much as I like this episode, I'm kind of sick of the time jump stuff. It needs to stop doing it, because I need to feel like I can get used to the world as it is now. And it's like whiplash every episode.
It's hard to connect always, because like a lot of the conflict or the issues you have to sort of read between the lines. And
they're being told off screen.
Yeah. And you're getting a lot of like conversations about how things should be. And you're not also getting like maybe the same level of set pieces as in the original Game of Thrones, which different show, but I think there's an expectation. There's going to be should be a bit more action. And we've had a few cool dragon sequences, which is probably what they're spending all the CG money on. But like we really, I mean, the Stepstones is the closest thing we got to that. But I think, as we said, like that was like cool, but no one's going to be like 10 years from now, oh, remember the Stepstones fight? Like it'll be like I think we need a bit more of that. And I would not be opposed if we kind of hopefully keep getting a little bit more of a connection outside of the Targaryen family with like, the kingdom. I don't know if that's like the show's telling us it's not that kind of show, But since we
the name of the show is not even that kind of show. Like it's
But I do remain hopeful, and I think that'll spice it up. And it's just like I don't want to hear anymore about how people don't want her to be the queen because she's not male. And it's just like I understand it. It is an important detail to know. And every now and then, and I get it's the crux of the conflict, but
it's not. It's the crux of the conflict, but not really, because it really doesn't matter that it's a male or a female. It's just she is ahead of the person that is his son. If it was a son also, it would still be a problem. I mean, that's the thing. Like if
his son, she would have been the proper heir, like her brother that died, Balon.
Right. But here's the thing, like then you would still have Alicent saying, well, this should be the rightful heir. You know what I mean? It would still exist. Like it would still exist. So like, she's a female, and that's leading to kind of the issues of the universe. But I think there would be issues anyways, is my point. Like the universe seems rather unforgiving in its inability to wiggle around within its own rules, at least the interpretation by the people in the universe.
And, to the point, it's Game of Thrones, right? The whole premise is like shit gets fucked up when people trying to ascend to the throne for whatever reason. Also, that big dragon skull, random aside, that big dragon skull they walked by, that it's like the largest dragon they had from Valyria, and Rhaenyra walked by. I think we saw it a few episodes ago. Do you notice all the candles that were lit up? I'm like, are those candles just lit up all the time? Because, back in the day, shit burned down all the time. There's like every castle you go to has burned down like 10 times. I'm like, do they have someone watching that? Or,
well, I don't know. I don't know what is that do we see that in the original show, right?
I think so. It's because it remains underneath the castle, and it's like a vestige of when the Targaryens brought it with them after the Doom. And I guess it was just, hey, we had this big fucking dragon. It's here now, and I guess
cool.
Robert Baratheon was like, "This adds, we'll keep it, even though I've gotten rid of the Mad King," and it just stayed. Yeah,
I do find it funny though that it's funny that the Targaryens really are kind of as bad as everybody said they are. Like we're seeing that now. Like, Viserys seems to be a decent guy, but like I think all the Targaryens are just so fucked up. Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like we're supposed to love these characters, and I do like these characters a lot, but like let's not get it twisted. They're all like varying shades of like fucking terrible. Even Rhaenyra is not great. Like
with like this whole thing, she's lying to her dad.
Right. Like shit. Like if you want me to not be sympathetic towards your main character of your show, they're doing a very good job of it, which I wonder how intentional that is, or how it's just like, I think it's intentional.
It's interesting because it's like, yes, he's manipulating her. And the king even says, the only thing you want is basically to hurt me. He says that to Daemon, which is 100% true. And we actually saw that last episode when the king offers to help him, and Daemon just loses his shit. Like, he's not interested in reconciliation. Even though he won't kill his brother. We said this before, he'll do everything but. And this just, and so he does manipulate Rhaenyra, but she does have some agency. And like when she has the opportunity to come clean, she could just say, he misled me or made me think one thing. And like, she could have gotten some sort of sympathy from Alicent, but she's just straight up like, no, like this thing didn't happen, which while we said technically it didn't, like,
but it did happen. It did happen.
She wanted it to happen.
And she did want it to happen for sure.
She did. And her wanting to happen is actually the reason why it didn't happen, because it like caught Daemon so off guard. So yeah, like this kind of gives us the first inkling that, Rhaenyra may not even be this sort of knight in shining armor. And she, she made Kristen break his vows. And it's the first time I think we've seen her put herself above everything else.
Right. In an episode where they talk about self-interest a lot, we finally get to see Rhaenyra really, like I said, it's not that I'm like falling out of love with her character, but they're giving her character a lot more nuance than I was expecting, because if she does kind of stray further in that direction towards kind of a more villainous character, or at least a more written that way, or more, I guess maybe self-serving character, I will understand why. But like the self-servingness is an easy seed to plant. Look, if they had planted that seed for Daenerys early on, I think we'd be saying like, oh, her villainous turn at the end of the show makes more sense. What I'm saying is, if they're planting seeds now for that for later, I'm on board, because it shows a little bit better wrangle of long-term storytelling. Because again, if she does have a more nuanced character and a more self-serving attitude, the longer the show goes on, we're seeing it now as opposed to one episode before they start doing it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I would say it's less about her being villainous, more about her saying like, okay, she might not always make the right decision, and she may like fuck up, like Jamie Lannister, right? Like obviously quite selfish, did a bunch of shitty things, but by the end of the series, you're like, he's not a villain, like, but he is very capable of doing bad things.
The less we say about Jamie Lannister at the end of that show, the better. But the less we say about how those characters ended up at the end of that show, frankly, the better.
But you know what I mean?
Like, no, I get it. Yeah.
We now see like, okay, we're not going to blindly say everything Rhaenyra does is the right thing.
Right. And again, that's what I'm wondering is because we do have a time jump, because we do have a substantial time jump coming up of like 15 years or something. I mean, it's like 10. Is it like I think it's 10 years now. It's unclear if it's 10 years from the beginning of the show or 10 years from episode 5. So it's either going to be like 3 or 5 years or like 10 years. She has to age enough for Emma Darcy to play her.
Yeah, maybe 10 years from that point.
We're not there yet. Yeah. So I am wondering again, like, because maybe they're using this as an opportunity to build her up, and then they turn the show over to somebody else and they start building that character up as more of a protagonist for the show, like Aegon, like Aemond, like the daughter that Viserys and Alicent have together. So it could be, I mean, again, like this is the Dance of Dragons. So there's going to be a lot of people vying for running at the same thing. And somebody has to be more of an antagonist than the others. Yeah. Is it Matt Smith? Maybe, probably. Who knows? That's
probably.
Again, like that's what I'm saying. Like the way they're writing her character, it's like, it's interesting because they're setting a tone that if they continue with it, she could become more of a, self-centered, the throne is mine and it's mine and I'm going to kill anybody in my way. And like, then you're more of an antagonist than you are a protagonist. So I'm excited for it because again, they bungled Daenerys so poorly that to see them trying to do it right here, I think is refreshing. And it's making me a little bit more hopeful for the future of this show.
Yeah, I agree. So like up for this episode overall, like, I was in on it. Like it was not perfect, but
this episode was pretty good. All things considered, it's pretty good. It still feels a little King's Landing bound, but I think, I don't know about you, but I get the distinct feeling the show might be rather King's Landing bound for a while, maybe only one more episode. But again, I don't know where this show goes once the time jump happens, because it might be like markedly different than what it is now. I doubt it, but I don't know.
Yeah. The one difference this has between like other Game of Thrones seasons is like, we know there's one like quite significant change happening. And I mean, 2 more weeks we'll know.
Where this show essentially ends its halfway point and turns into something else. It's, it may remind us of Hannibal's 3rd season, where it's like, all right, and here is like here is something completely different that we kind of said.
Dragon.
I mean,
that's exactly how he said it.
Yeah. Richard Armitage, baby. But yeah, I mean,
Hobbit, high fantasy.
Yeah.
It all comes back.
Yeah. It's all back to Game of Thrones. But yeah, we'll be talking about on the next episode of this show, we're going to be talking about the 5th episode of this show titled We Light the Way. So until then, Yashar, people still can't find you on the internet because you're hiding out, right?
Yeah, I'm in Dragonstone with my wife that I hate. But
your common law wife or whatever he says, your actual wife.
Actual wife, yeah. And he's like, Targaryens have had multiple wives before.
All true things he's saying. So
yeah, he's saying nothing.
He's saying nothing true. Factually incorrect. Let's just put it that way.
He could marry Rhaenyra, like it could get him off the king's back and whatnot. But I mean, he's a shitheel, a great shitheel, but a shitheel nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. As for me, when we're not talking about Matt Smith and stuff, you can find me at cstachiw.com, cstachiw.com. That's my link tree. Go there. I do a movie podcast once a week, a spooky podcast once a week, and a whole bunch of other stuff throughout the month. So that's where you can find those things at cstachiw.com. As for this show, gameofbros.com, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you should be able to find our show. Like, rate, and review the show on iTunes. We're going to keep doing this as long as the show is running, so be here for a while.